creating freedom. Curiosity brings clarity. Clarity brings courage, which brings creation, which is freedom. Freedom is something to exercise from within, not something to eventually get from without. Freedom is fundamentally not something to be delivered by another, not a release from confinement, debt, or other obligation, not by the acknowledgement and protections of a social authority, and not by collaborating with others to establish a revolution or new order or a revision or improvement to the old order. All of those are secondary and may or may not arise from the exercising of freedom. Freedom is already present and available to be practiced and developed. Always. The essential freedom is what is traditionally called freedom of thought. Ultimately, freedom of action is a conceptual impossibility. One may be free to do some specific action, but one is not free to do all actions. One might be able to go either east or west, but can one go in both directions at once? In contrast to action, which is fundamentally limited by circumstances, one is free to explore any thought whatsoever, any process of thinking. Through exploring freedom of thought, practicing this freedom, and developing this freedom, then certain actions may be recognized as relevant, including actions that one may have never considered before. So it's not important, am I free to do a particular thing, but which particular thing is the relevant thing to do? That's the question of clarity, or even curiosity. And if the relevant thing is identified, then commitment can produce a particular sequence of steps, let's say. So if there's an outcome to be achieved that is clearly identified, or a way to go about one's life in the near future that is identified as relevant, then commitment naturally produces a recognition of various actions and which action is most relevant. So there's this ongoing curiosity, clarity, and commitment, or courage. So this stage of freedom of thought is the stage of the transition from curiosity to clarity. When a particular action is clearly relevant, then courage is possible. We could also use the word commitment rather than courage, for no fear is required. However, when fear is present along with clarity, we can call that courage. So courage is just one form of commitment. However, be clear that fear in no way cancels or prevents commitment. In contrast, fear focuses attention toward a particular value or commitment. Fear is the same energy that, in the presence of clarity, manifests as courage. Thus, when there is a fear without the commitment of courage, that is a sign of a lack of clarity. Further, when there is a lack of clarity, that is a sign of a lack of curiosity. There's never an absence of curiosity, by the way, just a relative degree of curiosity for various possible priorities. When curiosity is concentrated and refined to the point of clarity, only then is commitment or courage possible. Finally, in the presence of courage or any other form of commitment, action arises. The activity that arises is a creative action. In fact, all action is creative, from every word to every movement. Actions that might be called destructive, such as disassembling some composite into pieces, are not literally destructive. What is sometimes called destruction is actually conversion. For instance, the burning of wood does not destroy the wood so much as convert it into heat and light and smoke and ashes and the sound of the crackling fire. It's the creation of fire. However, it is also valid to use the term destruction when referencing an instance of converting something from one thing to another. That's entirely valid. Just be clear that all forms are temporary. Change is the way of life. Be curious about change, and soon change will manifest through you in harmony with circumstances, which is the outward manifestation of nature. So there will be a partnering or harmonizing between outer circumstances and your inner nature, if curiosity is present. Your inner nature is creation, which arises naturally from curiosity, then clarity, and then courage. Circumstances develop in consequence of the manifesting of one's inner nature, which is creation, creativity. Rather than focus on changing outward circumstances, also called reform, as in reacting against circumstances like an opposition or protest to one or more emerging circumstances, one may be curious as to the manifesting of one's inner nature outward. That is, creating. The eternal process of creating, which has already been, and which continues always, is the way of freedom, the Tao of freedom, the expression of freedom, the development of freedom, the creating of freedom.